So in this one, I'm just going to briefly talk a little bit about what's happened so far in the story, and that is Trent set down some ground rules, specifically regarding the root cellar, and then he immediately needed to take her out to eat because they were both hungry, and of course after this he needed to take her out shopping because she just didn't meet his standards for clothing and so forth. And during the shopping spree, I did a lot of research on clothing. I did a lot of research on different shops that he would be able to shop at. I looked up the different bouquet, whatever they're called, you know, stores that they would shop at. I looked up suits, ties, watches, cufflinks, jewelry, different dresses, all as much stuff as I could think of. I looked up, and it took me a long time, probably over an hour or more, just to look up clothing and different things that somebody would wear. And then, of course, she came from a warmer climate, and they're in Colorado, so the climate there is extremely cold. I mean, at the time of making this video, I think the climate in Colorado is something like negative 20 degrees at the moment. So it is very cold there, and they get a lot of snow. He had to establish rules regarding the amount of money that she would have, getting her set up with her schooling and stuff like that. And ultimately what I was trying to accomplish here was to establish control, right? Trent really needed to show control over every aspect of her life. If she was going to stay with him, he was going to control every aspect of her life. And at the same time, I started giving hints to his next victim, the first victim in a series of victims that was going to pop up throughout this story. And this was the first one that I really needed to start hinting. You know, he's spying on this guy, he's watching this guy, but we'll talk more about that as we get to it. For now, this was mostly about just controlling the situation. And one of the things that Melody Summers was doing was calling him by his last name repeatedly. Mr. Chesterfield, Mr. Chesterfield, always calling him by this. And he repeatedly told her to call him Trent, and I tried to work in the agitation of not being called by his name multiple times, and it just didn't seem to click. So like I said, when you're writing with a co-author, it can be really quite challenging because you don't know what the mindset is of the other character. And this was where I was running into a lot of problems. Not only am I not educated on writing, I'm also not familiar with writing on forums, and I'm not familiar with co-writing. So I don't have control over the whole situation, right? I don't have that this happens, and I suppose I could do that, but by doing such, all I'm giving the other author is the ability to react rather than act. And I didn't want that to be the case. I wanted there to be an equal back and forth of action, reaction from both of us, not just myself. So with the restaurant that he took her to, and this is a reoccurring theme throughout the entire series, I looked up the restaurant. I looked up their menu. I looked up, images of the restaurant itself. I tried to find out more information about the restaurant. I looked up, Yelp reviews. I looked up, practically everything I could find so that I could properly write down a description of the restaurant when they entered it. And, do they have valet? If they do have valet, how does a valet actually behave? What would a valet driver or a valet person at a restaurant actually do? Do they give you tickets? Do they just remember you by face? Sure, I've used a valet in the past, but, that was 10, 20 years ago. So, I mean, things change. I needed to find out as much information as I could to make the story as realistic as I possibly could. It is fictional, and I can't emphasize that enough. It's a fictional story, but even when you're dealing with fiction, I want there to be a type of factual basis into the story, right? So you could say that you ate at a restaurant called Beams and everybody ignored you, and the valet was dressed in a golden suit, and you know they came out and served you the finest rack of ribs that you've ever had in your life. Or you could say that you went to Denny's, sat down, and dealt with these servers and so forth. And by comparison, the audience or the other author is able to relate to the story that you're presenting. And that's kind of where I was going with this. I really wanted somebody to be able to relate to what I was writing. If they looked up the restaurant, I wanted it to be relatable. I didn't want some completely fictional restaurant that they had gone to in a fictional city with a fictional world. I wanted everything to kind of mesh really well together and create this realistic atmosphere. And then, you know, it kind of got to, you know, learning more about Trent and learning more about how he behaved. You know, did he take piano lessons in school? Because I didn't mention that in the background. Stuff like that. So you got your basic back and forth questions going on, but I also didn't want that to become the focus point of the story either. So while I was answering questions, I'm also twisting and bringing into all his inner thoughts and what he's thinking at the same time. Plus I'm giving out descriptions of what's going on around them and how there's clinking glasses or there's people eating and what is the waitress doing. And so I kind of wanted to bring all these elements together to create a finite situation that wouldn't last. Something that, you know, could go on forever, but we didn't, I hope that we didn't want it to, right? I tried to present a situation where it was like, okay, this is enough information for now. We'll find out more later. And so that's kind of where I went with that. Hopefully all of that makes sense, and I'll see you in the next video.